Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Catholic Coffee Talk, a podcast where in between sips, we answer your Catholic questions. I'm your host, Father Brad Doyle, and I have with me our resident good Catholic, Peter Gone. Peter, you know why my voice is raspy? Do you hear that, by the way?
A little bit, but it's not going to be as raspy as our in-studio producer, Zach.
Well, wait, I didn't know if he was whispering earlier. Or
well, he was, because he's got laryngitis, the poor guy.
Oh no!
So all our listeners out there,
give us a little hearing of that.
You've got nothing on me, Father Brad.
Don't even. Is that true? Is
he's
that
not,
real?
Trust me, he's not putting anything on that. That's.
Oh no!
I've been with him all week.
I don't think I've ever experienced that. And I did not know. By the way, listeners, I did not know. I started off with a raspy voice, not knowing producer Zach had the whatever it is, laryngitis. I don't even know what laryngitis is. What is it?
Isn't it symptoms where like your throat's inflamed and your vocal box is inflamed? Yeah.
Okay, so it's just a symptom.
Yeah, I think it's more of symptoms than it is like a virus or something.
It's not a virus or disease itself.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I like it.
So
okay.
So yeah, if dear listener, wherever you are, spare a prayer for Zach and his family.
His family has to listen to him. So I have a little raspy because we had the parade. We finally had the Christmas parade in St. Francisville.
Don't think we're skipping over that, but go on.
Yeah, and that's it. It was just a big success. It was fantastic. It was thousands of people.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't realize how many people came in town. It was, they lined up all the floats on the top of Catholic Hill, so it was just like a cacophony of dance teams and bands and dance troops. And my troop, the 61 Bluffers, we stole the show. I'm not gonna lie, we kicked everyone's boo-heinies when it came to performance.
Well, again, speaking of boo-heinies, in this photo that you sent and the video that you sent me, I mean, you are so into it. And the rest of these dads with you are like, they're doing well, but you're in a league of your own, Father.
It's there's a certain level of commitment you have to acquire when doing these things. And,
exactly.
And look, some of our best dancers weren't in that video, so you would be surprised.
That's fair. But just to paint a picture for our listeners here, I mean, we got Father Brad and a whole bunch of other dads dancing down the street in St. Francisville wearing, what's this? Shorts, sneakers, matching ugly Christmas sweaters, and golf visors. Dancing like crazy.
And just humbling ourselves, preparing for the Christmas season, it's Advent, preparing for the Christmas season by humbling ourselves like the Lord, the incarnation is about the condescension of the divine down to our humble abode. And, we descended upon the streets with our humble dance moves. At least that's how I have to couch it to the bishop if he calls.
Well, there you go. Well, it looks like it was a good time.
Yeah, man. You did any dancing this past week?
Yeah. I went up to Philly for a wedding, which was a really good time.
So you did do some dancing.
Yeah, I did do some dancing. It was great. They were the reception was up at like a hotel. I don't know what you call it. Just event space. But it was like high up over the city of Philadelphia with kind of huge, floor to ceiling windows and views out over the city. It was all decorated for Christmas. It was really nice.
Now, did they yell at Santa Claus any this time? This trip?
I don't think so.
You don't know that whole thing, like Philadelphia, it's like the misnomer, like Philadelphia, the city of brotherly love, but like they booed Santa and threw snowballs at him at a Phillies game. It's like in the 70s or 80s.
Batteries at players too. I mean, I've heard things about that stadium.
Oh, they literally, it's the stadium that booed Santa. So they were having a horrible season one year. It was like, close to Christmas game, and like Santa came out and they all booed him. And it's just like, I mean, that's just, you're not a good person.
Yeah. I mean, I didn't get on here to bash Philly, but
I'm sorry, but I did, son. So anyway, you had a great time.
Yeah, had a great time. Had a good trip with me and the family. So
yeah, well, there's a lot of questions that people have about Saint Nicholas, Santa, how to celebrate that situation. Speaking of questions,
I was gonna say we're not gonna answer those questions, but we got
we're
some
not.
other questions
But
we can answer.
that was my attempt at a transition. It didn't work. It was more like it's like, by the way, we're not going to answer that question.
We're not going to answer
those questions. There are other questions. What's percolating? Where the questions percolating in your head get answers from the church's tradition.
This is a busy time of year. Most Catholics find it challenging to prepare for Christmas and stay consistent with an Advent program at the same time. That's why we created a series to help you prepare for Christmas without feeling overwhelmed. Good Catholic's Journey to Christmas is a digital devotional designed to work with your busy schedule. It's simple, flexible, and spiritually rewarding. Each day from the first Sunday of Advent until Christmas, you'll get a daily devotional email that includes Christmas novenas, Advent wreath prayers, a spiritual Christmas crib, and more. You get to decide which prayers or novenas you'd like to stick with. There's no requirement to do them all. You'll also get a spiritual guidance video from Father Matthew Koth, backed by popular demand, each Sunday during Advent, along with a written reflection that will keep your focus on Jesus during this hectic season. There's bonus content too, such as exclusive video recordings of the O antiphons. Have your best Advent yet and Christmas too. Click the link in the description to watch the trailer and sign up today.
Yeah, so our question today comes from Italy. So let's get to it. Greetings from Italy. Following my personal attempt to, quote, nunc cepi, a few months ago, I found your Catholic Coffee Talk podcast on Spotify, and here our listener is, I think, talking about our free Nunc Cepi series about like starting again and starting over with Good Catholic, and so she signed up for that, and then she found our podcast.
Oh, legit.
She says, "You're really great. You feed my theological hunger without breaking my daily routine of a mother of three working in a family business. ... And this tells me everything. Thank you very much indeed." So my question is, she's got two questions. She says, what's the church's position on biological testament, which is possible in Italy? And she's asking about like last will and testament, right? So number one, on the idea of not accepting, quote, therapeutic persistence. That is to say, not euthanasia, but simply switching off the machines around you whenever there's no realistic perspective one day ever you might survive without them. Basically, like, just turning off life support. And then second, what's the church's position on organ donation post-mortem? She says the only limit placed here in Italy by the state is a prohibition for donation of brain and gonads. Nevertheless, the state of Italy most of the time works in harmony with the Catholic Church. Still, it's not the church itself. So she says, thank you very much for answering my questions. Sorry for my English. Best regards, and Merry Christmas, Gergana. I hope I'm pronouncing that right, Gergana.
Hey, Gergana, your English is better than Peter's Latin, so...
Yeah, this is correct.
Hey, this is a great question because it comes up all the time in ministry and priestly ministry, and it's one of those things that most moral questions in someone's life might come up multiple times throughout their life, or maybe at earlier stages of life. Right? Think of the most controversial questions about life have to do with like sexuality, and that's like when you're young, right? Infertility and fertility care and contraception and this and that and chastity but this kind of comes up at the end of your life, right? And so sometimes we don't think about it, or people don't think, and then they're thrust into this very emotional situation where a loved one's towards the end of their life, and then they haven't thought about it. And they have to make these decisions and make these distinctions. And so I love it when people ask this question. I get to we get to present it outside of that emotional context. And so to answer particularly your questions, number one is about what you said, therapeutic persistence. We would, I guess, in the English-speaking world, or what the church says, and really, I'm getting this from the National Catholic Bioethics Forum or organization, the USCCB. It's fantastic, and also there's a document that it's called ethical and religious directives, and those were written for hospitals and medical professionals that desire to, so Catholic hospitals and medical professionals who are Catholic who want to practice according to their faith, in line with the gospel. These are directives, and it just lays it out very clearly. So that's where I'm getting most of this from, just straight from that document. But it starts with a distinction between ordinary care and extraordinary care. Seems, those are two easily definable words. Ordinary is just everyday care. Care, and how they just describe it, is care that is always necessary. This is care that is generally needed at all stages of life, for that life to continue. So like water, you always need water, right? You always need food. You always need shelter, clothing, cleaning, certain medication that eases a patient's suffering. These are ordinary care. And the church's teaching is that no matter what stage of life you're in, no matter what's happening, you have the right and actually obligation to receive ordinary care. Have you ever heard that term, Peter?
Yeah, ordinary care. I mean, this is me spinning a little bit, not spinning, but I didn't do this research. You did. I'm just here responding. But this seems so very connected to our right to life, So, to a certain extent, if you're going to die of thirst, right? Well, like that's an issue. Well, obviously that's an issue. But I mean, there's something about the ordinary, the normal care of the body, and within medical procedures as well. That's distinct from what would otherwise be extraordinary care. I mean, I've heard of this distinction before.
Yeah, and also this isn't dependent. So someone's right to these things aren't dependent on their ability to personally grasp them or achieve them or attain them, right? So you think of something like water or food, someone who can't feed themselves, we still have the obligation to feed those who can't. I mean, at the beginning of life, we can't feed ourselves, right? We can't clothe ourselves. We can't survive on our own. So ordinary care is not about someone's viability independently, right? It's about them receiving things that are just necessary for life in general, and that are just a part of human dignity. Now, something that comes up, I think I need to say this at this point because it'll often come to a situation in someone's life or into their life where their organs, especially because medical care is so good nowadays that life has been extended and kind of expands out and goes a little longer, and where back in the day maybe people would have expired quicker. There might be situations where somebody's vital organs are shutting down, different parts of their body, maybe even their stomach, their ability to assimilate food. So stopping feeding somebody or even giving someone water who cannot assimilate that food. It's not receiving that food isn't doing what it normally would do. It's not nourishing somebody. It's just forcing them. And it actually can begin to have negative effects, make death come quicker, be bad for the person. Stopping feeding someone whose body is naturally shutting down, their organs are naturally shutting down, is not an offense against this obligation to give ordinary care. Does that make sense?
It makes sense. I'm reminded, to bring up this horrendous chapter of history, but I'm reminded of the anecdotes I've read about in the liberation of the concentration camps in Germany.
Oh, okay.
Whereas, you had all these people who, aside from all the other abuses perpetrated against them, they were starving to death. And many of the soldiers, American, British, and Soviet as well, when they liberated these camps, their first instinct was to just give them as much food as possible. Yeah. And in many cases, that wasn't actually what was medically best for their health, because their bodies were not able to process the food, and it actually put many of them in danger.
Oh, wow.
And so they medically, when the doctors arrived, they had to basically prevent people from eating too much too quickly and really control their rehabilitation back to health. And I've heard that as well in other kind of starvation situations where people, whether they've been lost in the woods or something, they have to be very closely, their caloric intake has to be very closely monitored, because if you do it too much, you can shock the system and cause possibly irreparable harm. And so I can think about that in terms of the assimilation distinction. Maybe that's kind of what we're talking about a little bit, or at least maybe that's in the same ballpark, where just giving them food in the wrong way might actually do incredible amounts of harm. And so it's not just everyone needs to have a feast.
Yeah, and at the end of someone's life when their organs are shutting down, that person isn't going to die of starvation or die of dehydration. Right. They're dying of underlying pathologies that are already there that we're not causing. We're just ceasing to feed them because it would do nothing anyway. It would actually cause them discomfort. So I mean, the basic principle is like we ought not be the cause of somebody's death by something we actively did, right, through euthanasia, or did not provide that is ordinary means and that is proportionate, right? Now that distinction, the other side, so that's ordinary means. The other side would be extraordinary means, or what ethicists, Catholic ethicists, like to say better is disproportionate means, right? So extraordinary, as defined by the ethicist, a Catholic ethicist, is a person may forego extraordinary, disproportionate means of preserving life. Disproportionate means are those that in the patient's judgment do not offer reasonable hope of benefit or entail an excessive burden or impose excessive expense on the family or the community. This might seem like it runs counterintuitive to, the culture of life, if we think the culture of life is just preserving life for as long as possible at all means possible, right? And that's not necessarily true. In fact, it could be very anti-life and to try everything, even if it's disproportionately causing pain and suffering to our loved ones or to ourselves. It could be actually an offense against life to do those things. So some of the things that might be okay, that might be extraordinary means, that in certain situations at the end of life, we can cease using and it be moral, would be ventilators or respirators, the cessation of chemotherapy and other kind of definitely extraordinary approaches to medical care. Even things like do not resuscitate clauses. Do you know what a DNR is?
Right. So a DNR isn't just a statement from the patient basically saying that if if my heart stops or if I slip into a coma or whatever, you don't bring me back, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So if somebody has spent 10 years fighting cancer, they are on their last leg, they've been prepared, they've gone to confession, they've received the sacraments, there's very, 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 very small chance of them surviving if we even tried to bring them back. If they could, right, they are actively dying. We do not have to, and we should not, and especially if that person says, let me go to the Lord.
Yeah, I'm ready to die.
Like, do not resuscitate me. Is it merciful, let's say, somebody, a cancer patient who's 85 years old, has been prepared for eternity, they start coding, their heart stops. Right. Is it moral to then resuscitate them through, CPR, break their ribs, maybe puncture a lung because their ribs are broken, and then you bring them back for a week more with broken ribs and a punctured lung? I mean, it's just that. So there's more details to this, what it means to be pro-life at the end of life, than just stay alive at all costs, right? So DNRs are not bad. They're not evil, especially in these circumstances. They could be if let's say it's, someone does have a foreseeable or a reasonable chance at a longer and healthy life after. So it'd be different from an 85-year-old who has cancer who's most likely going to die, and a 15-year-old who gets in a car wreck, he would maybe use more extraordinary means because they have more of a chance to live past that accident.
Absolutely. And I think you're about to get to this in the show notes, but I think the important distinction here is the difference between action and inaction, and the difference between intention and not. Like, I heard it put bluntly once, there is a difference between letting someone die and shooting that person. There's a moral difference, right? And if we resign ourselves to a shallow consequentialism that only the consequences of our actions matter, there isn't necessarily a difference. Well, because they're still dead, It's like we just need to prevent as much suffering as possible, and that's all that matters. It's like, well, that's not all that matters. Our actions have a moral quality, and there's a huge distinction between killing versus someone dying.
Yeah, that is a blunt way of putting it. I think I do want to make this or address this. Some people might feel, because I deal with pastoral situations where like maybe half the family, there might be 4 kids, right?
Yeah.
And the kids are in their 60s and their parent is dying, and one of the kids, for whatever reason, through their own mourning, grief situation, their own life, their own whatever things they're dealing with, they are holding on, right? And so they are asking for and requesting very extraordinary, disproportionate means when the other children are trying to do what's best for their family or family member, their mother or father, and they say, let's just let them go to the Lord,
right?
And someone who's like in a situation where they're trying to use disproportionate means and they won't let their loved one go, might look at the letting them die as, I'm not doing something that I should for this person.
Yeah.
So I mean, think of it this way. What if you were in you walked into a subway and someone was on the track and you didn't help them? You could have helped them, but you didn't.
Right.
That would be bad.
Yeah.
Right. But that's not the same thing. And I want people to recognize that. Like, withholding extraordinary or disproportionate care, like in the colloquial kind of crass way of putting it, is pulling the plug, right? And that would be like stopping a ventilator,
right?
Stopping something that is
turning off the machine, like Gergana says.
Turning off a machine that's keeping someone alive in an extraordinary way. That is not the same thing as not helping someone who's on a track, who has the ability to live past this.
Right.
So just know those aren't the same thing. Those aren't the same things. And so it is okay to allow a loved one who's at the end of their life to be removed from a ventilator or a respirator, to stop extraordinary means of care like chemotherapy if it's too big of a burden for them financially or suffering wise.
All
so
right,
that's the first question.
That's the first question. I guess I have one other.
The second question has to do with like the donation of organs. Oh yeah, read it. We haven't read it yet. Okay.
I don't forget if I read it or not, but organ
you
donation.
You did read it. Just read it again.
Yeah, she says the only limit placed here by the state of Italy is a prohibition for donation of brain and gonads. Nevertheless, the state of Italy most of the time works in harmony with the Catholic Church. Still, it's not the Church itself. So, thanks for your information. So what do we got? Organ donation. What does the Church say?
Yeah, I hadn't really looked too much into this as much as I did into life issues, like with extraordinary means and ordinary means. So it was interesting to read what the Church said about this. And is it even possible to donate your brain? Like you can't do a brain transplant now, right?
No, you can't do a brain transplant. I think, though, there are... I think there are moral issues perhaps around research, so to speak. Like people who want to give their bodies to science, maybe, or they want to like put their brain on ice or something.
Okay. I
wonder
they might try to like preserve their brain in case there's some sort of technology.
Right. So I wonder if the state of Italy is saying you just can't do that. We're not doing that here.
Yeah. Well, yeah, because that would be against the Church's understanding of the body soul unity,
right? Of what like, a person is. Yeah.
We are not our brains, right? Right. So our intellect. Our brain is an organ that our soul uses to operate. It's not our intellect. So, and I'm not even going to get into the gonad thing because I didn't know about that. So I'm just going to say, like, in general, The living donors, with living donors. So this is where the ethical.
I'm gonna give you one of my kidneys, kind of thing.
Yeah, this is the living donor. So the recipient's need must be serious with no other treatment options. So the person that you want to give to. The benefit to the recipient must be proportionate to the risk taken by the donor. Well, that sounds reasonable, right? I mean, you wouldn't want to put a donor into a position for some cosmetic reason, let's say.
Certainly.
So like you wouldn't want to put someone's life in danger because you're trying to help someone cosmetically. It's not like the other person's life isn't in danger. You're just helping them cosmetically. So that wouldn't be good. The benefit to the recipient must be proportionate. Oh, we already said that. There must be free, informed consent from the donor without coercion. Obviously. Important.
Yes. Yeah.
I mean, but there's horrible situations of like trafficking and human trafficking and this being a part of it. So like the church is just saying like, look, it needs to be a free act of the will. You got to know what you're doing, and it's got to be proportionate from that side.
Absolutely.
So there's someone in my community right now. I play golf with him. He's in my 61 Bluffers dance troupe. Calais is his name, and he's donating one of his kidneys to someone in need. He doesn't really even know him that well. It's just an acquaintance in the area, and the man's just like going under the knife and helping this guy out because he happens to be a match. It's not a family member. It's like very rare that this happens. And man, dude's a boss.
Yeah, absolutely. Power
but
to
this
him.
other guy needs it, right?
Right.
So,
yeah.
And now for the deceased donors, which this is even more interesting. I think we could have all intuited that stuff, but the deceased donors, the following must be considered. Vital organs that occur singly in the body may only be removed after death. So what does that mean? Well, that means we wouldn't want somebody who is alive and the cause of their death being the removal of this organ that you're trying to donate.
Right. So you can't say, oh, my family member needs a liver. I'd rather them live than I live.
And so just like liver. put me under, take my
liver
and give it to them.
Yeah. No go. Can't do that.
It's no go. I mean that would be breaking that precept of Catholic bioethics, which is something we do actively cannot cause somebody's death. The donor's consent must be given well in advance, freely and in writing or in discussion with loved ones. So, obviously someone has the right to not donate their organs after their death. So you have to clearly make it your will through like a written will, or I would say stick with written, directives through a lawyer where it's very clear,
right?
Rather than just, I wanted to do this.
That also sounds like it as a precept for government. It needs to be opt in, not opt out. I've heard of some governments are trying to push for basically opt out kind of organ donation, that everyone is by default an organ donor. That
would be against someone's rights, I believe, intrinsic human rights.
And I also like that they mention loved ones as well, because what happens to your body, at least immediately following death, in terms of those weeks and days and weeks and months, as opposed to like the eternal time frame. But what happens to your body is completely in the purview of your family, of your loved ones. And yes, they are taking care of you and your wishes, but I think you also need to consider them and what they want. I mean, I've heard anecdotally of families that they want to dress the body themselves and they don't want to send it off to a morgue, to have it treated, or, in the case of, some family members, they don't want to do an autopsy because they don't see the reason for that. So, and they don't want, their loved one to be basically have surgery upon them, after death, if there's no true benefit to that, in order to establish a medical cause of death. So that sort of stuff matters in that mourning period, and I think it's incredibly important. And so, if you decide without telling your family, oh, I'm going to be an organ donor, then that could be an added stress and surprise and have all kinds of emotions after your death, and then they learn, oh, he's gonna get cut up, or he's gonna get, all this stuff's gonna happen. That can just cause a certain amount of angst. So I like that this specifies, it must be given well in advance. Your consent must be given well in advance, freely in writing or in discussion with loved ones. That it's part of the community as well.
Yeah. And I think this one's similar to the first one, but there must be moral certainty that the donor is in fact deceased, right? So, so for the deceased donor, and so so basically the church is okay with it, and there's many quotes from John Paul II. And
that's true. We should have given up. That's the short answer. The church is okay with this.
Is okay with this, and there might be particular times where it's not like. I hadn't thought about the genitalia aspect, and like, is that, the morality of that? I definitely think if it's associated with any kind of like gender reassignment surgery, then no, that would not be moral. But I didn't even get into that research because I just didn't want to.
Right, and then I think that's fine. Again, she's not really asking about that. She's just saying the state of Italy prohibits this, but everything else is all right. So.
Yeah, but good. I loved keeping my chops up because I used to love this in seminary. I really loved our bioethics class, and Father Jose Lavastida was our teacher. He was the rector when I was first in seminary, and he was our bioethics professor. Very good, very smart. And I even put together a bioethics symposium with like a lawyer, doctor, bioethicist, and med students. And these are the things that I think med students need to think about, because they need to think about it before they're put in these situations. So me and my friend Brad Fossier, who's Dr. Brad Fossier, lives down the street now from me in St. Francisville, and we put this bio symposium together, and it was really good. I really appreciated that.
That sounds really cool.
You ready for the bean of the week?
Let's do it.
We all need a little pick-me-up. Here's ours. So my bean is first the ethical and religious directives, which I mentioned, which is kind of very short, succinct. It's like, bite size. I'm going to directly state what this is. There's a longer form that I think is more helpful for practitioners, meaning like nurses, doctors, people who are really looking to dive into these areas of questions when it comes to bioethics. And that is Catholic Healthcare Ethics, a manual for practitioners. And it's in its 3rd edition right now. So it's a manual for people who are constantly in this world where distinctions have to be made. If you want to live your faith, look, the faith is universal. It goes into every aspect of our lives, so we cannot compartmentalize it. That is a great resource for like a doctor or a med student or someone who truly cares about this.
Yeah, I think that's a good shout. Good shout. All right, my bean of the week, it's just kind of a broad shout out, but I just want to kind of give some love to downtown urban churches.
Ooh.
Because almost every city I've lived in has these kind of older churches, usually from like the mid-19th century, like neo-Gothic or something. And they're always like sandwiched in between often like much taller buildings, that you just, I had this happen just this weekend in Philadelphia where, I was saying this kind of big hotel and, all the skyscrapers everywhere. And then we're like, all right, we got to go to church. And so we went down the block, and we turned a corner, and suddenly, like tucked away, it's seemingly tucked away, but it's not. It's there on the main street, is this beautiful neo-Gothic church. This was St. John the Evangelist in Philadelphia, so shout out to them. But I'm thinking of St. Patrick's Cathedral in New York. We got St. Peter's down here in Charlotte. We've got, there's all kinds of churches that are just like these often old, usually very beautiful churches that are just right on the sidewalk. And I just love that. I just love that the history that's there, that these churches are like downtown, right in the middle of the city. They like predate automobiles. They predate the infrastructure around them. And they're just kind of this living monument to the faith. So I just want to give a shout out to all those little parishes and all those, urban churches.
Yeah, the one in New Orleans would be Immaculate Conception, or the Jesuit Church it's called. And it's on Baronne Street, and it's kind of a little more in the central business district. So the buildings have kind of become like hotels or big business. It's not in the quarter. The quarter has kept its
Right.
18th century, 19th century feel. And the cathedral was like center, but the world hadn't grown up around it, where like Immaculate Conception is you're walking down the street and all of a sudden there's these like spires, like bam. And you're right. There is a cool feeling of like walking in, and it's the juxtaposition between modernity and how like the church can still exist and inform modernity and give a respite from the craziness of the world and all the honks. And I love being in one of those churches saying mass and like hearing the sirens, hearing the honks, hearing the people screaming outside.
Hearing the world happen outside. Yeah.
Yeah, it reminds us that we might be taking a little break, we might be getting recharged, we might be worshiping God, and outside of time isn't far away, and exactly. We have a mission to go into the world. So I agree with you there.
I love the history of it too, that like often these churches are built not necessarily right in the city, or they used to be built on the outskirts of the city, or I think St. Patrick's here in Charlotte.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
Well, St. Patrick's in Manhattan might be the same, where it was built.
Yeah, it was on the edge of the city. In fact, I looked at the research of it. It was built by John. What was his last name? It was John. It was the Irish Bishop of New York in like the mid 1800s, right? And they called him Dagger John because he would sign I've told you this before, but he'd sign all his letters with like a cross. But he was such like a BA, like just laying down the hammer that they said that's not a cross, that's a dagger.
This is John Hughes. Yeah.
Dagger
Hughes. Archbishop John Hughes, The Making of Irish America. That looks like a good book. Anyway.
Yeah, we should read that. So all those Irish immigrants were coming in lower Manhattan, and then they needed more parishes, so he created a couple parishes a little further north, and I'm not quite certain he was the one who built the cathedral, but the cathedral is not in like lower Manhattan where
right.
the oldest part of New York is. It's
right.
more up towards Central Park. So
but yeah, anyway, shout out to those urban parishes. It's great stuff. If you have one near you, check it out. If you remember one, if you're a parishioner there, write in, tell us about it. We'd love to see some pictures.
And a lot of times these urban I'm sorry, I know you keep trying to end it, but like I'm just, I'm jamming on it.
Let's
like,
go.
A lot of times these urban parishes are more real in the sense that like you have the Catholic parishioners, you have these people, and you have like, maybe like the business people coming in for mass,
right.
and then you have the homeless person
right.
like coming in, and
totally.
Where it's like, some of our parishes on the outskirts in suburbia tend to just follow right into the suburban culture of like,
totally.
I'm flying away. I'm running away from like all these other parts of the world, all these other demographics, and I'm just serving this one little monolith of a culture, whatever it may be. And in an urban place, you get the universality of the church.
No, you are spot on, Father. I mean, I think of many suburban parishes I've gone to and been a part of different times of my life where everyone is driving their SUVs and their 2.5 children, and again, I'm not knocking those people, and everyone needs spiritual care, and
everyone needs a half a child.
But I mean, just this weekend in Philly, I mean, we were there. I mean, we were travelers, we were visiting, and I got the feeling that there were, with a lot of hotels around this church, just kind of within their announcements, they kind of do the special like welcome to all of our visitors, So clearly they got a lot of travelers who come in for mass. But I mean, you had Black folks, you had Hispanic folks, you had all kinds of different racial groups and ethnic groups being kind of represented there at mass. There were some people who were really, like I said, kind of the businessmen. They looked like kind of more wealthier, probably lived up, not in uptown or downtown or kind of in Philly, and you had people who were going up to communion too, who looked like they weren't in the best of circumstances, but they were so happy to be there, and they were singing, and they had dirt on their hands, and kind of looked like, again, I don't want to make assumptions based on appearances, but they look like they're homeless or just in rough circumstances, but they're still there and they're still worshiping, and it was just a lot of people who seemed glad to be there.
All are welcome. All are welcome.
Aren't you not allowed to sing that anymore? Isn't that the one?
Yeah, I actually hate that song.
Me too.
I like that phrase.
Yeah,
but the song in other parts are kind of heretical. Anyway, You've been listening.
But you're right, Father. It's great to see that when it's in a community, with like that, with everyone's living in walking distance, and these vibrant communities.
Absolutely. You've been listening to Catholic Coffee Talk with me, Father Brad, and our resident Good Catholic, Peter Goen. Coffee Talk is brought to you by the Catholic Company and is part of the Good Catholic Podcast Cooperative. If this episode has blessed you, you can find more content at goodcatholic.com. As always, we ask you to leave a review, a rating, share the pod with a friend, or simply pray for us in our mission. If you have a question of your own that has been percolating, shoot us an email at askapriest@goodcatholic.com. Or you could leave a voice message at speakpipe.com/Catholic Coffee Talk. We might feature your message on a future episode, and we'll answer all your questions to the best of our abilities. To quote the psalmist, taste and see that the Lord is good. Continue to drink deeply from our great faith. We'll talk next week. Peace.